Hey watch friends, today we're going to check out the latest offering from the Swiss micro brand Direnzo, and this is the DRZ07 Universo. In case you missed it, did already feature an unboxing of this, so if you care to check out the packaging, you can go back and check that one out. Today we're just going to focus on the watch itself. This one launches on March 1st of 2025. This one actually is going to be a direct order from their website, which is typical, but this time they're not doing a pre-order, so these will start shipping on March 3rd, so pretty much immediately considering the weekend. The starting price is going to be $835 for the standard dials, and then we'll check out the Aventurine as well, that's $868. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive straight into this, but before we do, they did send this one into the channel, so if you saw that banner, I of course always want to be upfront about that. As far as the dimensions, the case measured from roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position is coming in at 37.6 millimeters, so it is one of their smaller ones. The bezel steps down roughly a millimeter, coming in at 36.7 millimeters. However, as we'll see and explore further, because of the way they integrated this, you can't really visually see it because of the curvature for it, but that's what I'm getting on the calipers. As far as the lugs, this is a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is a nice wrist versatile 45 millimeters. The thickness, inclusive of the crystal, I'm getting a little thicker than their stated spec, coming in at 11.2 millimeters. However, again, I will say because of the curvature, because of the undercuts of the bezel, and different things we'll look at, I do think it wears thinner than that, even though 11.2 really isn't too bad. The crystal itself is a flat sapphire crystal, which does feature inner AR coating as well. The movement is beating away with a Sellita SW200-1, and that is the elaborate grade. So it does have Inca block for shock protection, all those kind of things. Additionally, it's what you'd expect. It is going to be automatic. It is hacking, hand winding, 28,800 beats per hour, 38-hour power reserve, all that kind of good stuff. Additionally, it is important to note, this is available in both a date and no date configuration. While we're looking at the no date today, there is no ghost or phantom position, so that does just click straight out to the hacking, so that is a great incorporation there. The water resistance is a reasonable 100 meters or 10 atmospheres water resistance. For the sporty, dressy style, I think that's just fine. And then the weight, sized to my 6.5 inch wrist on this factory included bracelet, it's coming in at 121.9 grams. So really not too bad there, just a smidge over 120 grams. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive deeper and get a better feel for this actual model. First, for the colors. This is available in a whole host of color options. You have the green that we're looking at today. There's additionally a black version, an orange version, a gray version, a blue version, a purple version, and for the first time ever, an Aventurine version. As far as the basic layout of these, what you're going to notice is each one of these is going to carry their signature bowl shape. That's been through several iterations or several models here that has become an integral part of their design language, and I absolutely love that. That bowl just adds so much depth and just cleanness to the overall dial aesthetic. Much cooler integration to me than the typical rehot or chapter ring for that. As far as the dial layouts, you're going to notice they're all going to exhibit in the same manner. However, the finishing on it is going to vary. Most of them are going to be a sunburst like the green one we're looking at today, which does have a fume or a gradient applied to it as well. So you get an excellent color shift, especially on these more vibrant colors that you're seeing like this green one. However, the Aventurine and I believe the black version as well, those do not have, of course, the sunburst or the fume for that. The black, I believe, is like a matte or satiny texture for that, at least from what I can tell from the pictures. And then additionally, the Aventurine is, of course, Aventurine, so that's going to have its own unique characteristics there. Each of these dials, though, is going to have the same layout, so you're going to have printing at the 12 o'clock position with their name as well as logo, and then down at the 6 o'clock position, you have the Universo. Down at the far 6, you can see that this does have Swiss made printed and incorporated into the outer chapter ring. Additionally, speaking of the chapter ring, you'll notice that this does have their signature dual chapter ring. So you're going to have your inner as well as your outer on like the rehot or the actual bowl curvature out there. One of the things that's really cool is in the 5-minute increments, you can see that line actually connects those so it runs through the indexes. And I think that's a great little touch and attention to detail piece. Additionally, as I already mentioned, this is available in either a no date or a date version. So we're looking at the no date here. If you get the date version, it would be down at the 6 o'clock position. One of the things that you're going to notice, especially on this green one, which that's what we'll spend most of the time talking about, is just the phenomenal color shift that you get. This goes from a rich, saturated, not really quite an olive green, because we'll check out the Wandering Star in what I would call an olive green, but it just gets like an emerald green to it, where it truly does look like a piece of jewelry. But then in the right lighting, it brings out hints of gold, and you just get a gorgeous shift across, not only in the color, but with the way that that sunburst plays, where you get kind of that hourglass effect. Just absolutely stunning. Very happy with this style choice, and I expect many of them are going to be beautiful. As far as the hardware on this for both your hour and minute hand is more of a traditional sword kind of shape. So you can see a taper down at the base, and then just traditional spear layout or sword layout for the rest of the hand. They are going to be very heavily loomed, and they do have polishing to frame that for that nice little elegant touch. As far as the second hand on this, as you can see, is a traditional lollipop. It does have a lollipop counterbalance as well, or a round counterbalance. One of the things that's really cool, though, is that this does not only feature full polish, but additionally in the middle, you can notice that they actually incorporate for kind of like an integrated pinion cap, where that brings that round in there as well. So it sticks with the round theming that you'll see throughout this, and I think that's a nice little touch. As far as the markers, for this no-date version, you're going to see triangles at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 o'clock position, and then circles, again, tying in with the hand and otherwise, that are in between those. Again, with the 6 o'clock marker, you do lose that in favor of the date if you opt for the date version, though personally I love the clean aesthetic on this one with the no-date version. As far as the loom on this is going to be BGW9 all the way around. As far as the loom strength, I would say it's pretty strong. It's typical Direnzo performance, which is to say more than adequate. I don't think anyone's going to have any complaints. It is not the strongest that I've seen out there, especially on the hands. I do think the hands are a little bit weaker than the indexes themselves are. However, that being said, again, this is really kind of nitpicky here for that of it's not going to be a loom monster, but at the same time, it's more than sufficient in regular and real world usage. So no complaints there. As you go across lighting conditions, you do get just that gorgeous light play. Obviously, that's going to vary depending on what color you go with as to how it picks up, but this just gives you an idea there. Additionally, for a nice little touch, they did actually incorporate the loom on the crown as well, so that's always just a fun little accent. Shifting over to the bezel, as we already looked at earlier, this bezel is fixed and it is technically set back. However, with the way that they actually incorporated that, because they have the slopes to it, and because of the curvature of the case that we'll look at further, it really looks like it just lines up straight with the case, and I think it is a gorgeous integration. One of the things that is so cool with this in a typical fashion for Direnzo is they incorporated an undercut, which the subtlety of that is easy to miss, but as you look closer, it is just such a cool undercut as far as the way that that chops in. We've seen that before where it's kind of floated, but this, because it has that actual ledge or that slope to the undercutting, I think is just such a beautiful integration. As you go out to the outer perimeter of the bezel, you can see that this does change up the texture, so you're going to look at polishing on the lip, but then your prominent for the actual main surface of the bezel that you see from looking at the face is going to be brushing, which I think that really kind of walks that line between that tulle and dress vibe aesthetic for it. You do have that slope that continues, though it's more subtle, on the face itself for the bezel, and that steps in nicely to that crystal, which does have a little bit of that subtle box edge that just peeks out of there. Adds a little bit to the thickness as we saw earlier, but really plenty wearable there, and I think that is a great incorporation. As far as the case, this is 316L stainless steel. That's going to be true for all of the surfaces on this. Additionally, and most importantly, this is coated with our scratch resistant coating. So you're looking at 800 Vickers of scratch resistance. That is the case, that's your bezel, that's your bracelet, that's the clasp, all those things. So we'll get that out of the way right off the bat. That is great there because it's going to keep it looking new for longer. Most of this is going to be finished with polishing. As you can see, it is a very generous application of polishing on the case side here. Let's go wipe that down for any fingerprints. But with that being said, they do have little touches, as you can see, especially as you get out towards the lugs, where they do bring in some brushing for that to kind of break it up. One of the things that's so easy to miss is the delicate curves that this has. So checking that out from from the side profile here, and because of the polishing, it's a little bit hard to pick that up, but as I move across, and you can see with the reflection in that, it does have just a graceful curvature to that. So it's not a slab side at all, and that's just some of those elegant little touches that Direnzo does that are so easy to miss, but to me, that's part of what makes a Direnzo, it's those little pieces. You do additionally with those curves, it continues down to the downturn lugs, so that, as you can see, comes roughly flush with the case back there, so we'll call that more or less flush for that. As you shift out to the top of the lugs, you can see still with the polish, but here you can see a more crisp and distinct cut line, and that is going to be like that Solaris type edge cut. So you can very much see that from the top, so the silhouette as well as from the profile. So that is a clear, crisp cut line. Really like that on the Solaris, and I like that here as well. Additionally, as I already mentioned, that does break that up with some polishing. So not only do I think that ties in nicely with the bracelet, but that also just really adds that visual pop with that lug cut. So I think that's a great kiss of brushing that you have there on the top of the lugs. Additionally, with the lugs themselves, because of that cut, they look slimmer than they are. They're not what I would call a thick nor particularly slim lug. However, because of that visual cut, you can see that cuts in and just gives such a cool aesthetic to that, but it does also visually slim that out. In between, you're going to see this sort of traditional curvature for the case, so you're going to have a little bit of a gap unless you go with a fitted, if you put on a rubber strap or whatever, and we'll check out some options there. And then on the 3 o'clock side, you can see that there is no crown guard on this, which again, I think is in keeping with the style. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 6.4 millimeters. It is a screw down construction. It has a traditional coin edge, and as we already saw, this does have a loom dot there, which has become kind of a signature for the brand as far as with that dot incorporation, and it's always fun to have the loom accent. Very easy to grip a hold of, great grip, great traction, no problems there with sizing or otherwise. Shifting over to the case back on this is a screw-in construction. As you're going to see, this is a fixed case back. I love the way that they incorporated the keyholes for this, so as opposed to being the edge cuts, they actually have that delicately incorporated down in there, and I just think it's so much cleaner and better of aesthetic, plus no hot spots or sharp edges or anything like that. This additionally has layering, so you can see that it really has some kind of like steps to it where it comes up and then cuts in and so on and so forth for it. So again, this is one of those areas I mentioned in the unboxing. It might rock on the wrist or have flying saucer. Not at all. It tucks in nicely into the wrist, as we'll see here shortly, but really no complaints there. They additionally mix up the finishing, where you can see it has a mix of brushing, blasting, and polishing through there, and then prominently their logo in the middle. Shifting over to the bracelet, here on my 6.5-inch wrist, as I just mentioned, you can see that this fits very nicely. Additionally, it really settles and tucks nicely into the wrist. We'll see the side profile and all that stuff here, but it really does, I think, fit well across the board. As far as the sizing, you're looking at 20 millimeters at the lugs. It does taper down to 16 millimeters at the clasp. This bracelet style is going to be a traditional Jubilee type bracelet. The finishing on this, you're going to see it is brushing on the outer links, except polishing on the exterior of the outer links, or the sides, I should say. And then in the center links, for the center 3 of the 5-link construction, you're looking at polishing through there as well. It does have a female end link that is very well incorporated. If you notice for the lug profile and silhouette, very clean integration there. Really like that. And then with the female end links, this added to the lug is just going to be great versatility, very comfortable, very nice drape across the wrist, and we'll check out that articulation further. As far as the retention, this is held in with screws, which if you do not already have one, do highly encourage. I have a link down in the video description if you want to pick up a quality screwdriver, get some Loctite, all that kind of good stuff as well. As far as the articulation on this, as I already said in the unboxing, as well as already alluded to earlier, articulation's fantastic. You have short links here. They just drape so perfectly. It really feels like a second skin. No problems whatsoever in finding a comfortable sizing for this, nor for really having a great drape as well. And part of that sizing that you have for the comfort on this is their first time ever actually incorporating in with the clasp, where they have a toeless micro adjust. So you can see on the exterior, this is a Nodix. So this is a collaboration with Nodis. And this on the exterior is very nicely finished. You have your brushing, you have your polish accents, and that extends all the way to the edges. And then the double pusher integration, that's one of my favorite double pushers that I've seen. Very cleanly incorporated there. As you open it up, it does have a milled bridge on the interior, and that actually tucks into the back of the actual clasp, so that helps it to wear a little bit thinner. And then as far as the toolless micro, it does just have a basic pusher there. This is not a ratcheting style, and as we saw in the unboxing, it does, unfortunately, when it's fully extended, does leave a little bit of a bar to keep the thinness there for it. It's not the most visually or aesthetically pleasing, however, it does the job. And for most people, because of these short links, I don't think you're going to have an issue with finding a size where you can go for those first clicks and not even have that bar showing. So that's, I think, a little bit of a red herring, but it is something that is worth noting. On the back, this does not have quick release spring bars. However, with that being said, one of the requests that I received was to show with a couple straps here. So just checking out, here it is with a traditional Tropic rubber strap, just to kind of hold up and simulate that a little bit so you can get an idea of that aesthetic. And then additionally, here it is next to in Artem. This is their Hydroflex sailcloth, so you can get an idea as far as that visual there. Sorry, I'm not popping that on, but I don't want to take a chance of scratching it up or anything. All right, so now you should hopefully have a much better feel for this watch, but let's go ahead and bring in some comps so you can really round things out and get a better idea. I've already mentioned as far as some traits and characteristics, so this is next to their Mondial. This is DRZ04. You can really see some of the vibe and aesthetic. Obviously changes up the triangles for the pills. You know, you have for the kind of short pills or what have you for circles. But when you look at the dial, they really are clearly reminiscent, especially with the overall layout, inclusive of those dual chapterings, but of course integrated versus a changeable bracelet here. Now with the Solaris mentioned here, as far as the lug cuts, you can really see the similarity for the silhouette and the way that those lugs look. I absolutely love that. This is a model of the DRZ05 that hasn't been seen for a while. That's great there. And then bringing in for the Wandering Star, just to give you an idea here, this is the DRZ06. To give an idea of the green, you can see this is much more of like an olive drab green coloration, whereas this is much more of like an emerald green. So these two, I think, easily can find a place in the collection. Obviously, here, looking at these two, I'll happily have both, and I think they have very different use and wear cases. And then bringing it in here, this is a Henry Archer Vesterhoff. This is to give an idea of a traditional fixed bezel 40. You can see obviously a lot more dial presence from this one, so certainly it does look small here, but I don't think it looks small on the wrist. And then finally bringing into a smaller one, this is the Zelos Nova, and this is their original one. This is 38 millimeters, so it is still a little bit bigger, and I do think because of the thinner bezel, here, this does have a little bit more dowel presence to it, though this has a little more of that kind of chunky dress tool aesthetic for it. So that should give you a good idea as far as the sizing and how this stacks up. But let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives, these dials to me, just as is always the case with Direnzo, I think these are absolutely stunning, as is the overall design. I really think that it carries through their design language nicely, a lot of really cool touches where you can see nods to other watches while still wearing in its own right and on its own. I think the dial vibrancy, especially with this lineup, you've got a lot of choices available, inclusive of the date and no date, but there's really, I think, going to be something for most people out there. The comfort, as I've already indicated, it's just phenomenal. You know, for my 6.5-inch wrist, I think this fits excellently. I think it can go up to larger wrists with no problem, and it can certainly go down to smaller wrists as well. But that bracelet articulation, all those kind of things, superb there for comfort. I really think that true to many Direnzos, or to most Direnzos, where they channel that kind of retro futuristic, this I think is timeless. I think it has those vintage feels while still having the modern touches, whether you're talking the curved dial or the bowl-shaped dial, the toolless micro adjust, the hardened coating, all those kind of things. So I think you get the best of both worlds of that vintage with kind of that modern feel with it as well. And then speaking of the toolless micro, you know, that's fantastic to see the brand bringing that through. That's something I know many people have been looking for quite some time. Yes, it does make this a little more of a tool type aesthetic to it than it does for a dressier watch. However, I think this one walks that line nicely, and I think that's well done. And then same thing as far as the sizing, this really ties back to the comfort. To me, I know some people are going to find this to be too small. I think this is perfect. So for 6.5, 7.5-inch wrist, or if you just like more vintage size watches, I think this one's going to wear and read great. I really think that this was a great choice as far as sizing for fitting the aesthetic in the use case of this particular watch. But what about the critiques? There's really just a few things that I want to bring up here. First, for the minute hand, I would not have minded if that was just a hair longer for that. I would have liked that to have extended past or right out to the end of the indexes. It's just a little bit short of that, and I think it reads just a hair short for it. Really a minor thing there, and that's just going to come down to preference. Additionally, as far as quality control, this thing in typical Direnzo fashion is excellent as far as the overall fit and finishing, but I did notice on the minute hand, I don't even know if it's going to show up on camera or not, but on the left side of it, there is actually a little speck, a little imperfection. I'm not sure if it's a speck or an imperfection in the actual hand itself, but I saw it, and I'm of course always want to bring up those things to you if it's something I noticed. I didn't see anything else to take away from the quality control of this, and those kind of things unfortunately can happen. But again, very minor, very easy not to see as well. I initially thought it was just a speck on the crystal itself. And then as far as the clasp, this clasp, while I am excited to see a toolless micro adjust clasp, and while I do like the overall vibe and aesthetic of this, again, as we talked about, it's still not going to be the thinnest in the world. So that is kind of a trade-off that you have, even though this one does, I think, wear pretty thin, which is excellent because it tucks in with the bridge. It is still not going to be the thinnest clasp out there, especially if you went for a traditional tooling for that. That's just the nature of the beast. Additionally, as we had to look at the bridge extension for that, I don't think that's the most aesthetically pleasing either. And then the last two pieces are sticking with the bracelet, the lack of quick release spring bars. That's something I always like to see, especially when you've got universal lug sizing like this. It'd be great to be able to just quickly swap that around so I could actually throw those straps on there without going through a lot more work there. And then as far as the polishing, for me, this really just comes down, this is a subjective piece, but for me, polishing, I'm a little bit torn on that. I like a more delicate touch with polishing. I do appreciate that it does generally wear and read with a more delicate touch of polishing, but as you look at the case profile, I can't help but wonder what this would look like with brushing along the side, if that would accentuate the subtle curvature that it has to it more, or if the polishing is better suited there. It definitely would help to make the lug cut pop more, similar to what we saw in the Solaris. So for me, I think I'd probably lean in that direction, but again, that's just going to come down to preferences. So where does that leave us? To me, at the end of the day, this one screams Direnzo. So if you like their design language, I think you're absolutely going to like this one, especially if the sizing is to your particular taste. I really think that this brings not only their signature elements with the bowl, but it also has a nice nod to the past watches that we've looked at, while still having a flavor that's all its own, and in a packaging that I think is going to open this up to others who might have found their past models to be a little bit too big. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy this, do tap that like button. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button, and most importantly, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Which color do you like best? Is the model too small for you? Do you think that they picked the sizing well? Is there another one you'd prefer over this? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.